Well, hello and welcome to M&A's Church Planting and Renewal Conversations. I'm Chris Vogel, Director of Next Gen Pastors, and I serve M&A as the Director of Ecosystems Development. We gravitate to that which we find the greatest pleasure. We enjoy, or what we enjoy, is that which we do. In Barna's work, The State of Pastors, they found that when pastors are asked what task they enjoy most, 2/3 say preaching and teaching. Well, we could say that's understandable, as so much of our calling is word-centered. That same poll, though, reveals that just over 6% enjoy sharing the gospel the most. In that same study, when asked to rate themselves on various tasks, 57% say they're excellent in preaching and teaching. Only 10% say they're excellent in evangelism. This begs the question. Now, without turning our backs on our callings to proclaim the good news of Christ's death and resurrection, how are we to engage those who so need Christ? I wonder if we are not enjoying it, seeing ourselves as a skilled evangelist, is because we've not taken the time to listen, to hear, to come alongside those who need Christ. That important consideration is where Al Dayhoff has been a voice calling pastors to listen, to hear, to step out of the echo chamber of the four walls of their church and step into the wild of the parish that is around them. In order to help pastors be better equipped messengers of the good news, we must consider how we engage those outside the church. One way of doing that is through an evangelism residency that Al offers through Evangelize Today, ET for short. Well, joining us today is a great group of guys. Al Dayhoff is the guy in the black hat, the executive director of Evangelize Today, who through seminars and training sessions over the past 15 years has sought to breathe new life into the Great Commission as stated in Matthew 28. Harris Bond is a church planter in Monroe, Louisiana, in the early core group gathering stage of scratch plant ministry there. He moved to the area with his family just over a year ago after pastoring in Alabama for 11 years. He's just completed 1 year of an ET residency. And then we have Matthew McCulty. He serves as associate pastor of outreach and mercy at Altadena Valley Presbyterian Church in Birmingham, Alabama. Prior to this, Michael has served 10 years as a solo pastor in Monroe Presbyterian Church, Monroe, Alabama. And then finally, we've got Stephen Cooper. Stephen is the lead pastor of Harbor City Church in San Diego, serving in that role since 2014. He's getting ready to start his third year as a resident with Evangelize Today Ministries. Well, before we jump in, let me just start off by saying to those of you who are joining us this afternoon, this is meant to be a conversation, and we invite your participation. And which we got the chat box, you got the Q&A box there at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So please shoot us some questions and we'll take them as much as we're able to real time, because our idea here is to have a conversation. And so as we get underway, guys, let me just start by saying, Al, for you've done a number of webcasts with M&A over this past year and enjoyed hearing about the tattoo story hunters and the need for scholar evangelists. Why don't you tell us about an evangelism residency? What is it? Why is it needed? And then we'll hear from the other guys what their experience of that has been. And unmute your mic.
There we go. You know, everything that we've done to date, we sort of didn't sit around a table and say, let's plan this out. We actually sort of evolved into it. And, you know, after our little church in a blues bar thing began to grow, and I found myself in the middle of a blues bar with a parish of about 300 or 500 people that called me Pastor Al, people started asking me, could you coach me? And I said, you know, no, because I don't know what I'm doing. And they kept asking and sort of inventing this coaching relationship and called a residency. And I found that I loved it. And every guy falls on a spectrum somewhere, Chris. On the left-hand side, I find crash and burn, depression, he's burned out. And on the far right hand side, he is healthy and eager to go at a graduate or even a PhD level research into the wild. And it's my job to figure out where that person is on that spectrum, get in their head and fight for them. And we have all kinds of things we do together, but maybe this is the way I'm thinking about it at this moment. That resident becomes my workshop. And I try to hear what they're saying, and we incrementally take steps forward into the wild. We do up to 50 evangelism case studies in a year. We do 10 recirculating projects. It's 2 hours of phone coaching a month. You're part of a cohort that is the most creative group of men I have ever known. And the thing that leads the whole residency forward, Chris, in my opinion, is discovery in the wild. And if you make the discovery, energy explodes at that moment for the next discovery. So those are a few thoughts.
Okay, oh, great, thank you. For the rest of you guys, you've been doing this. What drew you to this this experience with Al? What is the residency offering you that you did not experience before? And then next I want to hear some of the stories. But what drew you into it? Anyone, just jump in.
I'll jump first. Yeah, I am. What am I? I'm 44, coming out of my 30s, and pretty much I spent all of my 30s in a wonderful town in Sylacauga, Alabama, pastoring a church called Knollwood Presbyterian Church, and we were rooted down very much in that town. And after a while, I think many people might do this. You begin to have a clearer sense of your strengths and your weaknesses and your skill sets. Except there was one thing that I was noticing that I was aware that was not healthy, is that I had, against my original sense of calling, and which has a lot to do with pastoring a community, a town, not just the church. I had found myself siloed. And what I mean by find myself siloed inside kind of a church space was this. On the one hand, much of our life space that we were filling up, my wife and I, were in very churched relationships. And that's part of life, and that's a good thing. But there was, every time I was involved, just being intentional in evangelism and sharing the gospel or equipping others in evangelism, it almost had this feel like, okay, now we're going to leave the city walls and fire arrows of gospel presentations. And then we went back inside the city walls. And there was a palpable, look, there were people who prayed to receive Christ or prayed a sinner's prayer, but where was there any sense of true connection? And I felt just aware there was a big disconnect, not only with myself, but others around me. And what do you do with that? There were desires and things God had been wiring me for that were not being utilized. It's like you dig yourself in a hole and somebody needs to dig you out. And so a lot of, then I run into another pastor friend that I think is watching this, Bert Boykin, and he had started doing a residency with Al and just became quite an open door for me to even come to one of the workshops. This ended up eventually, in God's providence, directed me towards church planting and church planter assessment. And of course, what's one of the things that assessment recommends? It just confirmed those suspicions. and it was just an opportunity to be a part of this. That's what drew me initially, and there's way more that we can talk about later on what I've found out since then that I'm very grateful for not only for Al, but the other residents as well.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Thanks. I appreciate that. Michael, any?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Well, I mean, what drew me was just the recognition that I love people. I love seeing transformation and convergence. I mean, that's what drew me into ministry to begin with. But if I was really going to engage in evangelistic opportunities, I needed accountability. I needed coaching, training, mentoring, whatever you wanted to do, or whatever you wanted to call it. But I really recognized I needed a person, and my just in discussions with my senior pastor, he was very supportive of that idea. My session had a lot of questions, but eventually was supportive of, we see where you're talking about. I'm an associate pastor at a church of about 500. I have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of teams, and all of us as pastors, I mean, I could spend all kinds of time doing everything, but actually getting out there in what Al calls the wild among non-Christians, intentionally putting myself in a place among non-Christians. But I just would not have done it. I mean, I know myself, been in ministry, 25 years. I would not have done it like this unless I had this residency type opportunity. And unless I had the support of my session to do it. And it's been, I mean, it's been beautiful. It's been wonderful. It's been stretching. It's been challenging. It's been renewing. And I'm going to tell you more, but that's how I got into it beginning.
Okay, that's great. Great. Stephen.
Yeah, for me,
Through
I
you.
mean, really, there's been two main reasons why I've engaged with Al and Evangelize Today. The first is that it does seem like evangelism is the thing that if I neglect, I'm not going to get fired for it. Life is so busy, and if I don't have a consistent reminder in my life to make sure that I'm engaging with folks that don't know Jesus, then it is too easy for the tyranny of the urgent to pull me away from the wild.
Yep.
And the wild is just what we call the world outside the church. And so, so having that, but for me, the bigger and more compelling reason why I engaged was because of Al and who he is. I'd been exposed a little bit to some of his insights and some of his discoveries with an article that By Faith magazine published about his tattoo book. And I thought, this is really insightful. Like, here's a man who is recognizing that the image of God is still latent and it's bursting forth from the non-Christians all over the world through tattoos. And for him to see and celebrate the image of God in people was something that drew me to him, like as an intellectually stimulating exercise. I wanted to learn from him. And what I didn't quite realize until we began our relationship was just how significant a support he would be for me in my personal and ministry life. That Al is someone who, I mean, he's known for listening to hear, and he's really great at training people on how to listen to the non-Christians in our lives. But what I've found is that I needed somebody who could listen to me and who could hear my own soul's cries and help me to like process just some of the darkness and the brokenness that I'm dealing with personally, in ministry, but also personally outside of ministry. And I have found him to be an amazing support and an amazing expression of God's loving kindness to me. And that has given me enormous fuel and energy, both in my ministry and in my evangelism.
Great. Thank you. Well, so let's hear some stories. What as you've gone through this residency program and engaging, Steve, I loved what you said. No, I don't love it, but it's true. Let's put it that way. Not sharing the gospel is something I can, skip doing and I won't get fired for, which seems so strange, but unfortunately so true. So let's hear some of the stories as you've gone out listening and engaging. What has stood out for you in that whole process? Any stories you want to share?
Well, I think in my own life, as well as in the people in my church, there's often a huge desire to share the gospel with people, but a feeling like, well, I don't really know how to do this, or I think I've been trained before and I have like a gospel presentation, the four spiritual laws, or versions of like the chasm of sin, and then the cross, bridges over. And I've got these things that I could share, but it just never feels appropriate. It never feels like it's the right time to bring it up. It never feels like the conversation will naturally produce that, where I won't come across seeming like just an awkward, socially unaware person in a conversation, because all of a sudden now I'm talking about Jesus. And what I've learned in dealing with Al and working with Al is that, my goodness, the image of God is coming out of people all the time, all in so many different ways. And tattoos, just asking somebody, hey, I noticed your tattoo, that looks really cool, is there a story behind it, is one of the techniques that we use to just draw people out and find out a little bit more of their story. And that's something where like, for someone to get a tattoo is a pretty significant event. It's a significant undertaking financially, there's pain involved. And hearing people tell the stories of why they've put a particular tattoo on their body is significant. And so you get to hear, like, the people that mean most to them, the examples in their life that mean most to them. And it's significant you're hearing someone talk. And this happens all the time. Like, it's someone tells me a story about someone that was special to them. It could be a parent, could be a grandparent. And I begin to say, well, tell me more about them. What do you love about them? And they say it. And then very often I get a chance to say, wow, I don't know where you are in your spiritual journey, but I got to tell you that the God that I believe in is very much like this person who's special to you in your life. And now I'm comparing this person that they esteem to God, and we're at a different place, and doors begin to open, and I find out what they then believe about God. And then, I hear them, listen to them, and then offer what I think about Jesus. And so, I mean, this is just one example of something that happens repeatedly. And because of being in this residency.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Anyone else? What a story, something that just illustrates how this has benefited you or enabled you to serve better?
I think at an innate level, we all know, especially those in ministry, we know that there is power in listening to people because you're offering them a gift. But I think it's nuclear, and we miss out on both giving and receiving that gift because of internal pressures and training. Anyway, we could go into lots of all that about how we do our training, credentialing, et cetera. But it is such a need, a human need, but all the more so in our screenified culture, to have an actual live human being listen to you. And so what you're doing is you're giving them this incredible gift of engaging with them without the purpose of trying to convince them or persuade them or say something to them. And so what people do is, if they can read, and this happens, I'm going to call him Jazz. Okay. With my friend Jazz, I have and he's he's an alternative lifestyle person. Okay. I'll just say that for our audience. And, but for him, he absolutely loves getting together with me because I give him space to process. I give him space to talk about his spiritual journey, his spiritual goals and longings. And every single time I get together with him, there's something that the Holy Spirit says that prompts me to give him a piece of the gospel, to give him the whole story of the gospel that's very relevant to him, to our relationship, to our connection. But that started with engaging him, listening to do research and discovery, scholar, evangelist stuff. And some of this is, feels like code language when we're saying, and that's okay. I mean, if you're interested in this, call me, talk to me, or any of one of us, because we can tell a lot more about this, but it works. I'm telling you, it works.
Good.
It's interesting you say that, Michael, because I've never ceased to be just amazed and fascinated and grateful that, I can go down a list of people in my life right now who, because of alternative lifestyle, like you mentioned, or maybe people who are wanting to know who has what kind of view in a kind of combative way, just by saying, how are you doing? Tell me what's going on in your life. Was there a story behind this tattoo? How did you get to where you are now? And just listen and resist the urge to try to have a take on something. And a lot of times our urges to want to respond quickly are self-protective. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Just, there's something you're uncomfortable and you feel the need to say something. And I've always thought of it as kind of like, your PPE. I'm taking the mask off and I'm risking. And when I am evidently wanting to listen to someone, it communicates that I'm not afraid of the risk, because people have a lot of risk in their lives. And when you listen, I've had the most encouraging things that have been said to me, that have been things that I wasn't expecting. It have been something like this: you probably are so different than me on this, but you don't relate to me like I think you would. And thank you for letting me share this with you. What do you think, Harris? And all of a sudden there's, and I'm not saying open door like a bait and switch. I just mean that there is a friendship. If I'll use the word intimacy, there's someone who described into me, you see. And I think that's what I'm trying to restore in so many things. And God works in that relational context.
Good.
Hey, can I answer this question, Chris?
Yeah, please go ahead.
That was one of my questions. How has the residency helped you as a pastor equip the people in your church or church plant to be involved in evangelism? Of course, that's a where's the fruit, question. That's a question for your session is going to have that question, or your leadership to give you permission to do this. And my response to that is, I want to say, my response is, you've got to be willing enough to go slow, to give yourself permission to discover, learn, go slow, way slower than you think you have possibility to go or permission to go, so that you see what the Holy Spirit wants to do in you uniquely, specifically. So this is not a credentialing programmatic, you're going to get a certificate that you've accomplished these 5 things or whatever, and you're all of a sudden going to become a superstar evangelist out of this. That it's not that way at all. So it's kind of hard to describe that, but it has definitely helped me enable my people to give themselves permission to admit their fears. You know, I'm scared to death. You're talking about going out in the wild. What? You go where, Michael? You do what? You know, and to admit that they're scared, and to admit that they need the Holy Spirit, that they need God to intervene, to help, to lead, to give them the ability to shut up and listen. I mean, I could go on, but it's a very different paradigm, because it's not an accomplishment paradigm. It's a seeking God paradigm in order to love people well.
Okay. Good.
I've got another type of story on this. We just finished a faith and work cohort in our church. So we had about 10 people gathered together. We've made some significant discoveries about how God's image shows up in the work that we do, so that the work that we do is exactly valuable. It's not just that work is a place to give you money to provide for your needs. It's not just that work is this missionary field, but the work itself matters. And as we've shared with this cohort over a 3-month period, one of the people who's in his mid 50s, he started a business, it got bought. So now he manages this division of this larger company that bought him. We've been going through, we talk about these 6 roles that we are supposed to be playing in our work. And this information has lit him on fire. And he is now like an evangelist in a way that is affirming the goodness of the work that he sees other people doing. And what it's done is it's enabled him to see and celebrate people in what they do, and to show them the significance and the impact that their work has on the community that they're serving. Like, because all work makes us community servants, for instance. And so he's now eager to share with people that he sees how what they're doing is serving people in the community that they live in. And by doing that, people are just, no one's ever complimented them on the work that they're doing before. And that opens a door wide. And they're like, where did you learn this? Like, this is amazing. And he says, actually, my church taught me this, because we actually believe that God gave us work as a gift to know him better and to care about other people. And he, like, literally, I mean, so he's literally on fire. And what's happened is that by being able to make discoveries and to see God's image expressed in work, now he has this whole subject matter that he can talk with other people that is religiously neutral. But if there's a response, then he can go into Christianity. And so he's engaging people in their work, like in what exactly they're talking, like what they're doing, in a way that doesn't automatically cause the blinders to come up or the defenses to go up, because now you're talking about God. And by affirming them in what they're doing, it's opened the door for him to then be able to share that this is coming from a God-oriented perspective.
Well, let me ask a question, maybe Al, of you. So, okay, so we're hearing kind of what it looks like as far as engaging. What about the cohort? How does that operate? What's the benefit? How do you engage the cohort in that whole process? You're muted again. You know, I don't know when I've ever had to say to Al Dayhoff, you know, usually it's mute yourself. Now I'm just saying, yeah, we want to hear.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we love hearing you. Go for it.
I hear that a lot, by the way. So one of the things that I view is, I find these residents that I work with are my peers. Okay, they're brilliant. They're among the 1% most educated beings in the history of civilization. And so I get to work with them, and I come into them not as some teacher oftentimes, but I find myself so energized by being on an exploration, National Geographic on assignment, and they discover something, and I get to be a recipient of that. And Chris, you've heard me say this, but we take we built the scholar pastor in the last 100 years, and he's puts all that in truthing, telling, and presenting. That's how we built him. Well, the world just dramatically changed. And in my opinion, the wild is looking for a spiritual father. And the spiritual father is not going in the wild, truthing, telling, and presenting. He's more researching, introspecting, and discovering in himself and along with others. And so this cohort, and we have a messenger group that has an ongoing dialogue, but all kinds of things happen that they share their research. And let me tell you one quick story, okay? I don't know, is Mark Alfarth on the thread, Chris?
I can check.
If he's not, I want to tell stories on him.
Yes, he is.
Okay, all right, then I'm really going to tell stories on him. Okay. Mark is the smartest resident I've ever worked with in my life. But he's a guy that said to me, Al, there's no way I'm going to ever do a tattoo interview. There is no way. There is no way. And he made me come in town and do one with him. Okay. And then he started doing tattoo interviews. Well, guess what? Today at 4:00 Eastern Standard Time, he's going to do a tattoo interview in a tattoo studio live with a tattoo artist and listen to the confessor and the client talk. This is an ET first, okay? No other resident has gotten that far within a studio, and Mark viewed himself as the bottom of the bottom. And this is an ET first, that a resident got that far in, right,
Hey,
Michael?
What's a confessor? I mean, you just said a tattoo person and a confessor, and what does that mean?
Yeah. So, I sat in my bar for 3 years to try to figure out what that space was. And I listened. And they named me Pastor Al. And I was, my wife and I are swing dancers, and I was dancing with one of Mike Pence's head staff members. And she said to me, Al, you're my confessor. And I said, Diane, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a Protestant. We can't shut up. And she said, don't you get it? Everybody in the bar comes to you to tell you something, in anger, in tears, and hugs, and looks, and out of control, in mental illness. And I said to her, I don't know what to do with that. She said, everybody comes to you. And she said this, you don't need to do anything. You need to listen and see if your listening can go into hearing, including hearing back 100 years. And can you hold, in other words, like a library book in a library, and hold that person's pain, like a tattoo does, by the way, and watch faith and healing stir. And a light bulb went off, and I was off on a journey. And I think we have re-entered the age of the confessor. Chris, I just did a conference with the Anglican Union last week in Tampa, and they had 30 bishops came to this thing. Scared me to death. Like, I'm going to stand in front of them and talk about like tattoos, right? And I said to them, tattoos are confessions are exploding in the wild, not in the buildings. And people have gotten so desperate to tell their stories and secrets, they're putting them in permanent ink on their wrapper. And a light bulb went off, Chris. When I'm in Protestant groups, they tend to go, okay, prove that. Can you give me some of this? But when I was with the Anglican group, they got it immediately. And boom, boom, it exploded with them. So the residents, we celebrate discoveries and progress, like dear Mark Alfarth, who will be, he's the leader of the pack today, dude.
Awesome.
Good. So what there was a well, we'll get to this other question in a minute, but for you guys, what's been your experience in the cohort as you're working together, being together? What's that look and feel like?
Well, if 2020 had not have happened, it wouldn't have been as helpful, honestly, because Zoom became a huge tool of ministry, and ET just went on with cohort via Zoom, and it's been a lifeline for us. If somebody's discouraged or if somebody's got a great story, it comes into the mix.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all unique, and we all have very different ministry experiences, but and it's nothing like a one up. There's nothing like that. It's more of deep, rich encouragement, perseverance. Al makes an environment where it's super easy and fun to make fun of each other, and so it's comedy hour. It's a great experience.
Okay, good. Are you guys all in the same cohort or different ones?
We're all in the same.
All in the same. Okay.
We have, Chris, we have ET 101 to 601, if you can stand 6 years, right? we haven't found that person yet. But what I love is the 201 guys say encouraging words to the 101 guys.
Mm-hmm.
And the 301 guys begin to brother and father the 101 and 102 guys. And it is a beautiful thing to see. And it's about me getting out of the way.
Okay, so this isn't Al sitting on high pontificating to the group, which would violate everything you're talking about anyway. You're creating a community among yourselves then.
Their discoveries, and so I don't mean to make this so much about tattoos. It's just one of the things we do, but it's one of the profound discoveries this team of scholar evangelists has dealt into even more. But we find that the magic moment, if I can use that word, is when the owner of the tattoo begins to process out loud, rub the tattoo, which often means introspection, and make discoveries under their tattoo right in front of you. This is what we find the Residency does in front of each other as they process out loud in front of peers. Some kind of permission happens where they make discoveries and we do too. And I'm sort of a resident in a way,
yeah,
as well, because I write down quickly what they say and then use it in my next conference.
Yeah, I mean, because we don't have that kind of space in our everyday lives, do we? What you just described is not a normal part of the way we live as pastors, having that kind of engagement.
Chris, I think about 5 or 6 years ago, I realized that nobody at church knew it was their job to ask me how I'm doing. And I think that, and I love my church. My leadership's amazing. And my staff is great, but nobody knew, it's just easy to think everyone else is doing great,
Mm-hmm.
or the pastor he's got a team or he's got whatever he needs. He's fine. And when I realized that, I said, this is not good. And I knew that I needed to have that. And so I engaged with my elders, and now one of the elders who's, of our church knows it's his job to ask me how I'm doing. And we
Mm-hmm.
have a schedule. We make sure we get together at least a certain amount of time. And I realized that that I didn't want to be alone with anything in my life. If someone didn't know about everything going on in my life, and that wasn't a good thing. But I also realized that given all that God has put in me and is wanting to do through me, no one person could handle the weight of all of that either. And so this residency, working with Al and the other guys, but like a lot of it was with Al, like he's able to carry a huge amount of what of what I'm carrying. He's able to help me shoulder the burden, and when when Jesus says, take my yoke and learn from me, He's offering to hitch himself up to me. And one of the ways that Jesus does that is through Al and Al's leadership. And so that's been significant. And I think that one of the things, I think I've heard Andy Stanley say, what gets rewarded gets repeated. And so one of the things that happens in the residency is that we're engaged in so many things in ministry, talking to people, pastoring people, reaching out, evangelizing, leading set, like doing all these things. And we just end up feeling like this is just what life is, and this is what everybody does. And what Al has the ability to do is he sees things that we do and he says, this is extraordinary. Like, you think this is ordinary, but no one else is able to do these things. And as a pastor, we don't want to act like we're elevated above our people. And yet the weight, the spiritual pressure and weight that Paul describes in 2 Corinthians that we experience in our lives is something that sometimes we need permission to realize that it's okay for us to be exhausted. It's okay for us to be frustrated. It's okay for us to be tired. And Al not only sees and celebrates the things that we're doing, and it's like, oh, wow, yeah, I guess this is significant. Dang, like, hey, maybe I'm not such a screw up. Maybe God is actually using me he's put his treasure in this earthen vessel, and Al is bringing that to bear. But then also, he's also able to carry the weight with us of the ministry. And so those are just a couple of other things that are blessings that come from being in a residency with Al.
Yeah, that's great.
I like to say that the way Al, first of all, Al, but then the residents with each other, the way Al's coach as confessor, really, and his coaching as being a confessor approach does for the resident what the resident is finding permission to do with others.
Okay.
And others can be out in the wild. It can be in your core group or your church. It is a pattern of discipleship all in and of itself. And you can't, that's not something that you can, it's better caught than taught. I'm reminded of what Paul actually says it in 1 Corinthians. He says to them, you have countless guides, but you don't have many fathers. And of course, we live in there's a book on everything. How many people, I'm going to learn how to parent from reading a book, No, there's many books, there's many guides, but many of us, particularly generationally in our time, did not have anyone to pour into us. We were orphans in that sense of discipleship, maybe, perhaps.
Yeah.
And when you have someone who is listening to you, and not listening mindlessly or merely therapeutically, but with discernment, to say, yes, this is a trauma, but do you see what God is doing in the midst of this? He's wiring you. You are able to relate to people who struggle with this in a way that other people cannot. Do you see that? And that's affirming. That makes it so much easier for you to do the same thing with others. And if you've had that someone pour into you, you know that. And that's the accountability, to use one word. That's the cohort, to use another word. Whether it's Al's coaching or whether it's the residents, and I'm trying to use that in my context in gathering a core group. How wonderful is it to be able to be a midwife, I guess you could say, with someone else, where they begin to see, wait, God has done this with me, and I have this other person in my life, and it's this amazing ministry opportunity. And see the lights go on with someone else is a beautiful, wonderful thing.
Yes.
Oh, it's great. Yeah. So as you're, engaging in this process, the question can often come up as people are hearing about this. Okay, listen to hear. Is there any point in which you speak, or is it just hearing? And this somewhat ties into a question that someone raised. He said, have you done Bible studies or Bible reading with people you're working with? If so, what have you found helpful? So how is that, again, it's always the mistake to think, well, I'm just doing this to get to that. No, this is in of itself good, but especially for folks in our circles, they get real nervous if they imagine there's never a, a point of speaking. So what have you found in that whole process?
Yeah, I mean, I have found that question in my own heart. What do you mean? We just listen. I've heard it from others, but I push back really hard against that now, because, and the way I do is look at your theology, look at who God is, look at how he grows the church, look at the book of Acts, and where is the Holy Spirit in your theology? And if he is planted, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I'm sorry, but I mean, what I mean is the Holy Spirit is in you. He has, if you're in ministry, he has placed you in ministry. He has sovereignly ordained every single conversation.
Mhm.
And so it's an adventure. It's like this, what's going to happen when I go out into the wild today? And it's just getting ourselves out of the way in the sense of, I've got to do something. I've got to show something for this. I've got to report something in a newsletter or a board meeting, session meeting, whatever. It's reliance upon the Holy Spirit that is such a joy, that is transformative. It's being still enough to cease striving, right? Psalm 46, to know that God is in me, he is with me, he wants to love others through me. And I mean, every single time there's something happens. Something happens that is part of the kingdom advancing. Even if it's, you didn't say a word, even if it's some kind of obstacle, we count it all joy when we experience trials of many kinds. I mean, it's God moving his kingdom forward in us and through us. And it's just theology, guys. It works.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, the answer to this question is heck yeah. Have you done Bible studies or Bible reading with people? I got like one neighbor who, she's a lesbian woman, and she and I have read Jonah together. We read the Gospel of John together, Ephesians, and we made it, I think, 7 or 8 chapters into Acts. So yes, the listening leads to all kinds of discipleship. But like I've got 2 people right now, one who just finished the book of Mark, and then another one that's almost finished. So I use the book of Mark because it's the shortest gospel, and think about attention spans with people. So those are also things that are going live. I guess I think the listening to hear part is to here's a discovery that I've made over the last few months, is that what listening to hear does is it gives people the experience of what it is like to be in relationship with a God who justifies them. Like listening to hear lets people know that whoever they are, in all of their honesty, we care. And I think that is what the doctrine of justification by faith teaches us about how God feels about us. And so it's almost like listening to hear is letting people taste and see the goodness of God, that he loves them, cares about them, and is with them wherever they are, and receives them and accepts them just as they are. And so, but obviously you want anybody that you care about to learn and to grow in their understanding of Jesus and of salvation and of what it looks like to walk with him. And so listening to hear does lead into discipleship, which includes reading the Bible with people. And so, yes, that's been my experience.
Okay, good. All right. Who's this designed for? One, what if someone's not a pastor but just wants to be a part of this and to soak it in and to engage in this? can someone who's not a pastor, or another question would be, where, if a pastor, where in the life cycle do you think would be most helpful? Because I think a lot of times are, as wonderful and everything else our training is, we often are trained out of the very thing we're talking about. And we're skilled away from it, if you will. And so is there a benefit for someone before they go to seminary or while they're in seminary? Or is there a need for this to be the post brick wall opportunity? You know, you've been in ministry and you're going, this just ain't working the way I thought it would. So what's your experience, your thoughts on all of that? Who's the evangelism residency designed for?
So one of the things we found, we did a study with seminary students, and I'm a full believer in them, but we found they were going into the wild credentialing, not evangelizing, because that's what we taught them. That's what we taught them. And when that didn't work, then we retreat back into the building, we become part of the ecosystem, and we perfect what we've already discovered, and we spend the rest of our life in that space. Our young ministers, those either coming out of high school or in college, or before or in the beginning of seminary, these are gold, because we have now made an epic pivot. We have re-entered the age of the parish. There's not enough pulpits, there's not enough people to support the brick and mortar anymore. And we have re-entered the age of the parish. And now us building a team of individuals that make discoveries out in the wild. In my opinion, an evangelist is not simply somebody that gives a presentation. They discover what's going on. I've got a group of atheists working with me. I've got a group of cross-dressers working with me. It brings joy to my life that they let me in, and the discoveries just make my ordination glow. Chris, to vector back, the tribe that I have my ordination in, we tend not to know what to do with people that we can't make a presentation to, and we don't know what to do as a person if we can't make a presentation. Among the things that we found is that the longer someone talks, the more they talk themselves towards God. Isn't that an interesting lean, that the image of God is actually honing in on something if it's given space? We found the more somebody tattoos, the more they tattoo themselves towards God. But in my journey in this confessor thing, Chris, I've begun to ask this question, and check with me in 6 months and see if in the laboratory, my parish, I am now sitting in my parish going, is this person actually making a presentation to themselves about the gospel while I'm listening to them? And am I suddenly in this space where the image of God is holding the promises and the time we've had together and making a presentation to themselves? And my other thought is, when do I present? When they ask. And they do. And that might be the epic question, is why don't people ever ask us? What kind of life are we living that we venture out and we call this thing outreach? I think the age of the parish is we venture out and stay. So yes, we were evolving. The first year of the residency, I focus on the man, and so that he makes discoveries for a year and doesn't have to go equip somebody else. Year 2 is we pivot back and start with a team in the church, and slower is faster.
Al, do you want just pastors to apply for the residency, or are you working with non-pastors too?
I've had some non-pastors, and the key is, let me see if I'm going to say this right, Stephen, and help me with this. They got to really want it. They got to want it. For me to use my time well, and them to use their time well, and for it to be a value for them, if they want it, I'm in. Right? Mm-hmm. I had one guy wanted to sign up, and I said, it sounds like your session wants you to sign up for this as a punishment. I said, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think this is what's for you. And I had another guy go, look, I'm the stupidest evangelist that has ever been born. And he started talking, and I said, I so much want to work with you. Would you give me a chance? So that's kind of the world I live in.
Well, we got a couple minutes left. Al, there's a new residency starting this new year, right? Is it January, February?
January, and I mean the first, we have a Zoom meeting on January 14th with the new cohort. We just all go, who's on board?
Okay.
You guys sign up, and individuals or women sign up in January and into February, and we have a select amount of slots. ET is not about how many can we get. We want a quality group of individuals, and that has really paid off, Chris. Oh my gosh, these residents are just amazing.
And so what would be the next steps if somebody is interested or wants to hear more? Is there any way of just kind of hearing more, asking questions, seeing what it's all about?
One of the steps is emailing another resident and going, look, I can't ask this question to Al or out loud, but can I ask you? And they're all happy to talk and tell you the good and the bad. I mean, this is not $100,000 deal. This is not a $50,000 deal. This is a residency is about $6,000. And so you put that in, perspective.
Right.
They can email me at evangelizetoday@gmail.com or at gmail.com, or go to our website, evangelizetoday.com. We just changed it to .com today.
Was it just today? Because I kept getting a dead end. Okay, so it's evangelizetoday.com.
Yes, I have great timing on how we do these things. So,
hey Al, we got a question here from D. Just says, is there a place for women in this, or is it male driven?
Absolutely. And women tend to be different evangelists than men. They live in a little bit of a different world, and we want to grow that segment of ET. And we only grow as fast as we discover. If we got 100 resident applications in January, we're going to take 20 or 30 of them. And that's just that's where we're at. And it's been such a joy, but absolutely. And I think women in the wild is a natural fit. Chris, you've heard me say this. It changes the discussion, because the denomination that I'm in, our pulpits are full of illustrations. You know why they're full of illustrations? Because we don't have stories. And I find real stories begin to change the DNA of the organization. Like Harris Bond, he's out in the wild, and he suddenly is in Augustine's Confessions right in front of him.
Oh, yeah.
And it was one of the great stories of Harris Bond's residency.
Good. So you had mentioned, okay, so residency is a year long, mentioned the cost. So you mentioned 2 hours of phone coaching.
About 2.5 hours of phone coaching a month. Trust me, that'll be enough for you.
Right. And then how often does the cohort get together virtually?
We get together virtually once a month, and usually half to 3/4 show up. And we're learning. The cohort all wants to get together. I want to bring them all to my bar, my parish, because my whole bar wants to meet them, by the way. So 2 years ago, we were a little awkward with the cohort. This past year, we took a huge step. This next year, we want to take even a more step of just the bond of the group and figuring out what it is. We like to move at the speed of discovery.
And then anything else that's involved in that cohort, what else would I expect as I go out? Any other?
We research our way back in, and I study each resident, because each resident is in a different place. You get a fancy briefcase, right? Right, Stephen?
Yep, super fancy.
And And there are times I put little there you go. I make deals between residents. Like we had Stephen, you and somebody else was involved as a prosecutor in a trial, and I linked those two guys up. And so as these guys let me into their inner lives, oftentimes somebody else in the residency is uniquely going through that exact thing. So I try to not be the expert of that. I let the residents be the experts.
Good. Well, guys, thank you so much. We've come to the end of the hour, and appreciate you taking the time, you guys, to talk, and the rest of those who are with us here and attending and being with us. The link and all this will be sent out to all of you attending, and feel free to share it with others to be able to keep the conversations going. Well, again, thank you all. This will be our last M&A conversations of this year. We'll pick up next month in 2021, January the 6th, talking about rural church planting and some of the unique challenges there. And we get together about every other week, but sometimes I do it every week. It's a great opportunity to hear from all of you. Again, thank you. Lord bless, and may the Lord be with you in this Advent season. Have a good day.